Well, I just learned one of the most profound things ever. And he's always said that in the end times, he's going to reveal things. And many of the things he's going to reveal were biblical. Many of them were historical. But it turns out many of them are just plain common sense. And yet the world has been so caught up in doing its thing that it's failed on such a basic, fundamental level. So, this is crazy. He just revealed this, and I guess sometimes talking about it right after it's revealed is better, because otherwise I think about it for days, weeks, months, and then I don't understand how I felt about it when it was first revealed. So, before I get started though, because he's so weird, yesterday I was looking at these Christmas lights that I got on clearance from Dollar General last Christmas after, the season was over. So they were like $2.20. And yesterday he had me look up thinking that no matter where I was or what was going on around me or in the world, that just because those lights were up, that I could look at something beautiful. And then today he pointed out how for the majority of human history, if a human being would have seen these, they literally would not have known what their eyes were seeing. It would be supernatural to them. Like an ancient Roman running across. In England, they're called fairy lights, which makes them even cuter. But an ancient Roman running across fairy lights would just, I don't know if they'd laugh or I don't know. It would be so funny. Anyway, so appreciate our modern conveniences, because we really do have access to things that can alleviate the suffering and drudgery of existence if we consciously appreciate them. So if you are flat broke and can do nothing more than have some old Christmas lights on once in a while so your eyes can see something beautiful, then take advantage of it. Some people don't even have that. Okay, so this big revelation, I've kind of known this, but he's never allowed me to put it together at this level. I keep repeating that I might go in and out here so you can just have some variety in your viewing experience. So, I don't know why he's acting weird. Okay. So, I've said in many videos that we are under the covenant with Jesus. We are under the covenant of grace. And so, the law we have to follow is love God with all your heart and love your neighbor as yourself. What does that mean? Especially if you don't even like yourself, right? Like, some of us don't even treat ourselves well at all. If we treated others the way we treat ourselves, then, oh man, okay. So, what does it mean, this law? And he simplified it down to its absolute most basic essence. And it is so simple. What that verse, let me do a translation of how we can look at it at its most basic, and it solves every problem on earth. If you love God, if you truly love God, then you look around the earth and you are in absolute wonder at his magnificent creation. Yes, you can shed tears over this or that, but when you look at it as a whole, what he has created is absolutely magnificent. It is a symphony of delights and complexities and mysteries and beauty found in the strangest of places. Lights that would astound and shock people from just maybe 150, 200 years ago. Maybe, I don't even know. I don't have time to think that through. So when we really love God, we have to have respect for his creation. But the true beauty of his creation are all the living things. All the living things are a reflection of God, some part of God, and he ordained that they should exist. From the mosquito to the juvenile delinquent to people who hardly anyone on earth except their parents have even known their name. He created it all. So how can we, if we love him, how can we show him that we do? And there's only one way. And it's so simple, and it's so rare to find. If you want to show God you love him, you respect all of his creation. And the most intimate, direct, fulfilling way that we can show another being, but we'll say person, that we love them is to listen. To listen. Every single person on earth's soul yearns to be heard and listened to. God is crying out to us in other people's pain, in other people's faces, in people's desire to be seen. At the end of the day, all anyone really needs or wants is to be listened to. So you say, well, how can I listen to everybody? He didn't ask you to listen to everybody. He asked you to listen to your neighbor. Who is your neighbor? You can only interact with so many people during a day. And even if you are in a position to hear from many people, the way God has broken down the universe is that you still can only listen to a certain number of people a day. All God asks of us in the entire law of Jesus Christ is to listen to one another. That's it. It doesn't matter who you are or what you do. You mean I'm supposed to listen to my students? Yes. If you are a teacher, you are supposed to listen to your students. God created your students. They're trying to speak to you. He created your children. They have understandings. They need to express. They need to explore with you. Husbands and wives, I don't know. I've been married. There comes a point when it becomes almost like impossible to hear anything the other person says. This whole law of forgiveness, he's saying, opens the ears. When we forgive someone, our ears get opened and we can listen to them. When we don't forgive, our ears are shut. Why would we want to listen to someone that's harmed us or that we perceive to have harmed us? The reason we want to listen is because everybody out in the world is doing their best. Believe it or not. Believe it or not, this life is so incredibly hard. I'm asking if people like Meghan Markle are doing their best. I try to have compassion for everyone on earth, but if someone's leaving a trail of destruction and suffering and pain and separation behind them whenever they go, wherever they go, I don't know. I don't want to talk about her. I don't want to talk about something bad. I want to talk about the fact that every single one of us only have a limited number of people in our lives. A limited number of people we run across each day, whether it's online, whether it's in real life. There are so many people on this earth who've never even been listened to once in their life. And this is why the Bible goes on and on and on about how God hates arrogance. Not listening is a form of arrogance. He understands it. He's not angry if you're a poor listener. Welcome to the club. It's very hard to listen. And yet it's so easy. And once you start listening, this is the crazy part. Once you start listening, you start to see into other people's hearts and realize that they didn't really mean to hurt you. They were trying to find someone to listen to them. Like we're all screaming in our own way to be listened to. But no one will listen. And the louder we scream to be listened to, the less people listen. Do you know who people do listen to? Is people who have listened to them. Truly listened. When we're truly listening, we're not making judgments. We're literally listening. And we can actually tell how close or how righteous someone is by how closely they listen. If I had to approach someone with a problem, I'm looking for certain traits in that person that make communicating with them non-threatening and fulfilling. I want to feel respected. Most people don't speak unless they have something to say. They might have the wrong thing to say because they have wrong perceptions. But whatever they're saying to them is actually important. Just as what you say to people, your wish is to be listened to. That's the only sole basic desire of all human beings in every moment they exist, is to be listened to. And every time we don't listen to someone, we're rejecting them. We're saying, I don't even see any God in you. He has me sometimes go to false prophets' comment pages, and there'll be people trying to communicate with them, help them, or just say anything. And the people won't even respond to them, as if they hardly get any comments. But they don't even take the time to respond to another human being who took the time to write to them. That 5 minutes was too much of a sacrifice. Why don't we want to sacrifice our time to listen to someone else when we get to see God every time we meet another person? We get to meet a different aspect of our Creator. So I guess he said earlier, I don't know. He usually says several times and then narrows it down to perfection. But right now we're at the stage where it's sounding more like, if you love, instead of the 10 Commandments, we went from the 10 Commandments to Jesus saying the law can be boiled down to these two things: love the Lord God with all your heart, soul, and mind, whatever, and love your neighbor as yourself, depending on the version you're reading. Now we can tighten this down to, if you love God with all your heart, you will show Him and the world that you do so by listening to the people He has put in your life. I had a principal once that was one of the most amazing listeners I have ever met. And after he would listen, he would then be capable of implementing appropriate measures to address whatever concerns were brought to him. I then had another principal who was equally adept at listening. She truly listened and sought to understand. However, somewhere in there was a disconnect. So she was unable to implement the outcomes. She wasn't processing what everyone was telling her, but she was listening. Both of those show godliness, righteousness. It is when people do not listen at all that God is most grieved. People think that sin is not doing or doing the 10 Commandments, like murdering, lying, coveting, all that stuff. Those are only sins because they can end up harming your neighbor. Just a minute. The minute I start thinking I've just lost my train of thought, I lose it completely. Okay, we're on the 10 Commandments. Oh, people think that God is judging them by these 10 Commandments, but God is also judging us by the reaction other human beings have in our presence. That means if everyone's had a bad teacher, when everyone's sitting in that classroom, there's all this negative energy going on. That teacher is having a reaction occur in every single student that's negative. It's not just sin. That's not in the 10 Commandments, but that is going against a person's righteousness. So that's why the Bible, way more than the 10 Commandments, it says that God hates arrogance. And I can tell you, if there's one thing God hates, it's arrogance. He always says, what can you do with an arrogant person? I'm God, not me. This is what God's saying to me. I'm God, and they won't even listen to me. Who can live around an arrogant person? At the end of the day, God's really just finding out who is capable of living a nice, happy, peaceful life where the entire community works together for the good. This is not possible with arrogant people. Arrogant people think that their brain is telling them the way things should be, and that other people are stupid, uneducated, whatever. When we sit down and listen to people, really, really, truly listen, it takes practice. It takes hours and hours and hours and hours of practice. You know, if you have a good friend, call them up and practice. Like, it's an art. You'll have to constantly remind yourself, oh, wait, I'm not supposed to be thinking about what I should be saying next. I need to be actively listening because this person is trying to express something that for whatever reason God created the urge in them to express. And if I don't listen to them, I'm essentially rejecting the opportunity to love God and show him that I love him. What's crazy is that if you do this, everyone ends up loving you. Everyone ends up coming to you when they want advice. You can give accurate advice because you've listened to them. So this is a sacrifice because for some bizarre reason, it hurts so bad to listen to someone when you are desperate to say what you want to say, or to tell them your opinion because you're angry at them. But the law of God is asking us to love him, and therefore we love his creations. I did want to bring up the thing about the animals. God loves animals. This is no kind of joke. The vulnerability of animals and that they are at our mercy sometimes, when they're not at the mercy of him, they are at the mercy of us. His compassion for their vulnerability is immense. So, anyway, sorry, got a little intense right there. We need to listen to animals with our eyes. Animals can't speak to us, but we can listen to animals with our eyes, which then God reminded me is a good example of how we need to listen to humans with both our eyes and our ears. If someone is on the autism spectrum, they may not be able to listen with their eyes. They will literally only be able to listen to the literal words that are being said. This is I guess you could call it a handicap. They're not judged for failing to listen with their eyes. But if you run across a friend and they're telling you everything's fine, but you can tell they've been crying, you might want to poke around a little bit more, because we don't just listen with our ears. We need to listen with our eyes, and then our heart may or may not engage. God is kind of behind our heart engaging or not. But if we don't even take the time to look and listen, then he can't engage our heart. That's kind of cool. He's just now explaining that, but it's kind of beautiful. I guess we don't really get to engage our hearts unless we take the time to try and please God. You can ask God to be a better listener. It's hard to be a good listener. I'm not trying to say this is easy. But I will say that once you learn the art of listening, your heart starts to open up, and everybody starts to love you, and you didn't even intend for that to happen. You weren't looking for their love. You were looking for God. You were looking to find out the mystery of God inside them. God made them, and their opinion is completely different from yours. So what in them did God put in there that made their opinion so different from yours? Listen, ask questions. Don't accuse, don't attack, don't brush off. Since I've been in this trial, I'm not myself. I don't have my own brain. I used to be an excellent listener, and now I can't handle anything. I can't handle communication. I can't handle other people's problems. I have such a weight of suffering upon my shoulders that I don't have the strength and energy to be a truly good listener. I'm still listening more than most people have ever listened in their lives. I've made friends with almost every person, deep, deep friendships with everyone God sent me. I'm so much the richer for it. I'm not alone because God sent people to my channel who I listened to and interacted with. And now they're not alone and I'm not alone. There's nothing more than this. Whether you're a nurse, whether you're a tech person, whether you're a waitress, whether you do anything on earth, try and listen more and see the magic that happens. It feels and seems like such a sacrifice at first. And the more you listen, the more you realize listening is so much kind of more delightful than talking. Because no one really listens to you either. Does that make sense? Some people are very charming or threatening. There are people that think everybody listens to them, and there are people who everybody listens to. But for the most part, when we open our mouth to give our opinion, nobody cares. That's the whole problem. If everybody cared all the time, probably nothing would get accomplished, but the world would be a much happier place. That was a joke. All right, well, I wanted to get this thought out while it was still fresh, and it came to me on such a deep level. To understand it, you will have to kind of pull at the thought and bring it up. Or you can pray to God, God, will you please remind me about this? Maybe when I see sparkling lights, I'll think, man, I need to listen better. I need to listen better. I'll show God I love him by listening with my ears and eyes to the best of my ability. You can't change someone's story. See, we all want to tell other people what we think so that we can persuade them to who knows what. But the truth is, every person on earth is in their own storyline written for them by God. Your storyline is not better, wiser, anything than anyone else's. You may be nicer than other people, and that makes you more righteous, but that's it. How do we show we're nice? We listen. Then, whether we're able to process or appease the person we're trying to listen to, that's up to God. All we have to do to show God we love him is actually listen. Put a smile on your face and say to yourself, what does this person have to say? What are they feeling? How are they perceiving the situation? Why are they so angry? Now, there's a lot of power dynamics in relationships. There are some relationships where you can't do much listening. The person is so corrupted spiritually or whatever. So please don't start developing some kind of weird belief now that if you don't listen, God's angry at you. God is a God of grace and love. We are vessels of God's storyline. There are a lot of things in our lives that we have no control over. And if you've ever made a New Year's resolution, you know that's true. We are not in control of that much of our lives. There are people with OCD who've been put in positions where they have money and all the things they need to make their OCD go full blown, and they have very successful lives. These are usually not people that love God. Like, they're not sitting there looking around at nature saying, I wonder how God did that. I wonder if God doesn't like these things that make me sad on earth. Whatever. You know what I'm saying. I guess I'm going to go pretty soon. He always likes these long endings, though, apparently. Well, I'm trying to... Oh, now he has me trying to think how I learned to listen. As a teacher in the rough schools I was teaching in, I realized very quickly no one wanted to hear anything I had to say. No one. But I knew I still wanted to impact these students. So I had to somehow speak to them without getting their attention and having them listen to me with their ears. So what I started doing was simply listening to their stories, asking them questions, just listening, not judging. And as this started to happen, I realized that I had no idea what I had thought of these people before. I had never interacted with them. But I had a totally wrong understanding of who these people were. And by these people, I mean I was working with schools with 98% free lunches. I had not really involved myself with those groups before God allowed me to work with them. So once I started listening, I was a whole new world opened up, a whole new existence, a whole new purpose for my existence, a whole new fire was lit in my heart. And all I had to do was listen. Once you start listening, something like magical happens. Once you say, okay, I'm just going to listen and not judge, I'm literally going to really try and see their point of view. He's pointing something out. There does come a point when someone can't listen to someone close to them, because everybody's fully aware of the other person's beliefs and opinions, and they're incompatible. If you want to really, what I'm talking more about is people that are not, you should try all this with the people in your immediate vicinity if you can, especially your children. Your children will react to love, unconditional love, in a way that will heal many of your problems. All you have to do is listen. If they think they had a horrible childhood, you might know differently, but right in that moment, God or the Lord has convinced them that they've had a horrible childhood and they just need to be listened to. Listening to one of your children heals them. If you're an oppressor in a marriage, such as a man who never really listens to his wife and makes sure that she knows she doesn't have the right to speak, you'd get a lot of mileage out of listening. If you already try and listen and never speak, and someone's being abusive towards you or something along those lines, then there's different rules. Whenever I make a video or you listen to something I say, you need to understand that there are always variables and a spectrum of different possibilities. Nothing is absolute. So please don't, nothing I say should ever get you thinking that God is disappointed in you unless you've been unkind to people. And if you have, you can say you're sorry. You can let God know, man, I think I might have messed up there. He's cool with that. He's easy to forgive if you actually see what you've done. The problem is most people never listen long enough to even see what they've done. They just think they're right. When I start getting heated up like that, that's kind of like the spirit. And this is how the spirit feels. It gets emotional about things. It tries to sway. We're all kind of like rudders in the wind. And if we have a lot of holes in our rudder, we don't move very well. And if we have a strong rudder, God can kind of move us in the direction He wants us to go. We don't really get to choose how many holes are in our rudder. So God understands that and has compassion. So if you have a lot of holes in your rudder and have been really nasty to some people and you realize, whoa, maybe I wasn't very nice and I was confused, I'm really sorry. Dang. Sometimes you might have to sit with that for a while, because when you really understand that you've been nasty to another human being that God created, and He might really think that they're a lot nicer than you are. God's forgiving, but you've got to understand that we're all being judged because He has to place us somewhere. Jesus is at the top. Everybody else has to fall someplace behind Jesus. There will be a second and a third and a fourth and a fifth most righteous person. We know this because God says that anyone who dies in the end times will be a martyr. They'll be a saint. Suffering gets you something. Jesus suffered and has suffered along with us ever since He first suffered. And so we all have to be put in our place. There's no place where everybody gets the exact same thing. That's so boring, and that's so communism. A good world cannot work where everybody has the same thing. Some people want some things. God made other people to want other things. He made it all work. Except that some people get greedy and selfish, and other people think they know better than everybody else, and they never listen. He's saying right now he often speaks to people through other people's words. And I know this for a fact because He controls many of the things people around me say. They're perfectly timed. I don't know why I'm getting so heated. Because this is really a beautiful topic that all you have to do to please God is listen. That's it. That's the ultimate sacrifice. You're sacrificing your time and your ego for His creation. You do that once a day, and you've done more than many people do in years. Truly, listen. I mean, he also says it's kind of listen and support. When you realize everybody's story was written by God and you're listening to their concerns or their pain, then you know God gave them that pain. That is not their fault. You might think it's their fault. Well, they did drugs. No, God wrote for them to be an addict. Well, they got pregnant when they were 18. No. God wrote that that baby would be born at that exact minute, long before you even were even thought of being conceived of. Not literally, but on this earth. Anyway, God is the Logos. If you get the core of God, then you can figure everything else out. And the core of God is that if everybody simply listened to their neighbor, as if their neighbor had something to say that might not be their fault, but that their neighbor has feelings and deserves to be heard, that their neighbor is in as much pain as they are, most likely. This is how we show God we love him. There's nothing more than this. You could give billions of dollars away, but that's actually usually God prompting you somehow to give those billions of dollars away. Listening is not something God can force anyone to do. Listening is an act of love and respect. He can't force someone to listen. He can force someone not to listen. But if you seek to be a listener... I heard something weird. I think I'm going to cut this off and make sure my mom's okay. God bless you all. Amen.